Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. Today we're replacing the rear wheel bearing here on this 2012 Forester, so let's jump right in. So oddly enough, the rear wheel bearing here on my 2012 Forester has been starting to go for probably about 4 years now. It was a while ago that I noticed just a little bit of looseness in the play in the rear wheel, and on bends at highway speeds you could hear a slight groan from the rear end, but it never seemed to want to get any worse. And the only reason I mention that is I've had to do both of the front wheel bearings, and those go extremely quickly. Pretty much by the time you hear noise from them, they're shot to the point where there's so much play in the bearing that they're kind of scary to even think about driving on until you can get the parts in. But like I said, this rear wheel bearing here has been going, I'd say honestly, for about 4 years now, but it's at the point where I just need to go ahead and get it done, specifically before the winter gets here, because if something goes wrong, I do have the WRX to drive, and that's going to be taken off the road this winter, so I might as well get this rear wheel bearing done here while I have a backup car in case I need it. So I'm going to go ahead and try to show you guys the amount of play that's in the wheel. I have a feeling it's not going to show up visually very well on camera, so I've actually taken my microphone and I've stuck it right there on top of the rotor so that hopefully you can hear the noise from the little bit of play that there is in this rear wheel bearing. And so that's all there is. It's really not that much play. When it first started to loosen up, I had to kind of go underneath and look from the backside and do this same motion but from the backside of the wheel, and then you can actually see sort of where the CV shaft goes into the bearing. You can see the bearing moving a little bit. Again, I could probably get another year out of this, but I figure I might as well just go tackle it now just in case it decides to get really worse and degrade fast over this winter. Like I just mentioned, I have a backup vehicle I can use right now, so let's go ahead. We got to start by getting the wheel off, caliper off, rotor off, and the e-brake assembly off. I'm going to breeze pretty quickly through that. I'm going to link a video below where I showed how to disassemble the rear end to do the parking brake shoes that are inside the rotor. So if you need a better look at that, you can always check that link out. But for the sake of this video, because I'm focusing just on the bearing, I'm just going to breeze real quick through all of this. So one thing that I wasn't expecting was just how rusty the parking brake components themselves were going to be. I just did these not too long ago, so I didn't buy extras. I guess I should have gone ahead and bought a hardware kit for the parking brakes. So I'm going to have to reuse some of that. And then another thing that I forgot to order was one of these axle nuts. You're going to see me reuse this. You're not supposed to reuse Subaru axle nuts. So what I'll do is I'll order one. They're super easy to replace. All you got to do is pull the wheel off, take it off, replace it. So I'll order one of those when it comes in. We'll replace the old one, but for now I'm going to have to reuse this one. And then that gives us access to the 4 14mm bolts that hold the hub in place. And I'm only going to back these out about 1/4 of an inch, and I'll show you why in a minute. All right, so the reason we only back these off about 1/4 of an inch is if you live in a rusty area, you own a Subaru, if you've ever replaced any of the 4 wheel bearings on these Subarus, they can be really stuck in there, especially if they're really rusty. The front one that I had to do gave me a real headache, and that was just after 100,000 miles. We're at about 190,000 miles now, so I can say that's pretty good for these rear wheel bearings, made it to almost 200,000 miles. But they're going to be real rusty. And one method I haven't tried yet, it seems to be recommended by a lot of people, is to use an air hammer. I picked this up specifically for this project with a blunt end on it like this, and we're just going to hammer on the backs of the heads of these bolts to pop that bearing out the front. Alright, so that's actually not working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these bolts fully, and we're going to try using the air hammer on the front in a couple of different ways. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to take the notched bit that I have here from a hammer drill. And we're going to put on here and we're going to try to hit this so that it wants to rotate and try to break free. Alright, so that didn't even want to budge. So last ditch effort here before we try to brainstorm onto another method. I'm going to use the chisel bit and try to wedge it behind the bearing and kind of try to pull it out a little bit. Obviously we're going to destroy this backing plate, but I did order a new one, and you can see that this old one here really isn't worth saving anyway. Alright, so I've been hammering away at that for basically forever now. It's not gonna budge. I assumed it was more like the front, where it doesn't index very far in there, until I went and looked at the new part I got sitting over on the bench. It actually slots quite a ways in there, and with how stuck that is, I don't think, at least in this position, I'm gonna be able to get much further. So I think at least right now, my only option is to take the whole knuckle off. We can bring it over to the bench and try working on it there, and then worst case scenario, I might have to just order a whole new knuckle and slap that in. I guess that wouldn't be the end of the world, because like I said, I did forget to order a couple of parts. We can order all those parts and get them in. For now, I just got to work on trying to get this knuckle apart. I have a feeling that pinch bolt in the top control arm is going to break, because they always love to break on rusty Subarus. But let's see what we can accomplish and get this knuckle out of here.
All right, so I know I forgot a couple times to hit record, so I'm not sure how much of that you guys missed. So let's just recap everything we got in. I got the knuckle all put back in. I still have to come through. I just want to put the proper torque onto these bolts just to make sure that they are tight enough and I haven't left anything too loose. And then obviously you need to torque the bolts for the wheel bearing itself. But we got the backing plate in there, the wheel bearing on. The only thing I had to do with the knuckle was just take a flap disc on my angle grinder and just clean up the face a little bit. That chisel kind of coming in an angle, put some raised little burrs and stuff. It wasn't terrible, just had to make sure it was nice and flat. We got that on there, and then we ran our parking brake cable through, and we got our clip right back on there. I didn't film taking that clip off because there's so much rust you probably wouldn't have been able to see it anyway. I would have liked to have ordered a new one, but I completely forgot. So we reused the old one. Luckily, it's like a stainless steel material, so it really didn't get too corroded by all the rust. So that's in there. The parking brake cable is through into the new dust shield. I did order a new one of these brackets. We've got our new shoe on there, and now we're just going to go ahead and reassemble the parking brake with the parts on hand. Like I said, I wasn't expecting as much rust, but now that I've been back here, I took a look at my brake pads here in the caliper. I have a feeling I'm going to be doing rear pads and rotors again pretty soon. So since those are going to be off, I'll just order a new kit and probably throw some new parts in there just because I don't know why. I just don't like throwing really old rusty parts on after you've replaced everything with nice new stuff. It just looks like crap. I'm sure it's going to function fine, but in the future I'll just get those swapped out. But for now we got to get everything rebuilt and put back together. And I know I forgot to point out earlier, I did remove the ABS sensor. You should be able to do this whole job minus the removing the knuckle, but if you don't have to remove your knuckle, you should be able to do this job without removing this sensor. I just learning from my own mistakes in the past, I ended up damaging the front sensor. It wasn't really anything to do with the process of removing the hub. I just screwed up and made a mistake, and I smashed the front ABS sensor, which is an expensive mistake, so I just removed it for good measure. Another reason why I wanted to go ahead and get this project tackled was if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll remember that when I got the new wheels for the WRX, I had to run a smaller spacer to get the fitment right. So I have the 25mm spacers that I was running on there just sitting in the corner, and I kind of want to put them here on my Forester. This is the same 5x100 fitment as my WRX, so they'll swap right on there, no problem. And I think it's going to be kind of a cool look for the Forester. So I'll get all 4 of those on the wheels. Like I said, I just want to go through and do a final torque check just of all the suspension points that we took apart. Then we can get it on the ground, take a look, see how the spacers look, and then I'll take it for a quick drive and make sure that there's no noises or any concerns, or make sure everything feels right here in the rear end. And I just got back from the quick test drive. Everything sounds good, everything feels good, so everything's good to go with that brand new wheel bearing in the back. Hopefully ready to go another 190,000 miles. And if you're curious, if you have an SH chassis Forester, that's what a 25mm spacer on your wheels is going to look like. These wheels are slightly more of an offset than the factory ones. They were sort of the closest Tire Rack had in terms of offset with these Sparco wheels that I wanted to get. I think it was like 1/4 of an inch more out, so not that much. But yeah, I really like how it looks. It's subtle. It doesn't scream like, wow, this car has massive spacers on it. You probably wouldn't notice if you weren't into Subarus or into Foresters or anything like that. But I do really like how it looks. And instead of wasting those spacers that came off of the WRX, now we got them on the Forester, so they're gonna go ahead and continue to get some use. And so that's gonna go ahead and do it for this one, guys. If you're looking at this whole project of getting that rear wheel bearing replaced and you're like, wow, that looks like a lot of work, I'm not sure I can do that, just keep in mind that most of that headache was only because this is a Rust Belt car here in upstate New York. My old job, I used to commute 45 minutes in one direction, so an hour and a half round trip to work every single day on the highways that are completely coated with all the salt spray and chemicals that they put down for the wintertime. So if you live in a southern state or you don't do all that much wintertime driving, that wheel bearing should in theory come out with little to no effort on its own. But hopefully the video helps you out. And like always, guys, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below. And if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.